Hello, everyone. I'm Sherry Kroll, the chair of the Provincial Executive Directors Group. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Indigenous people of all the lands in which we find ourselves on today. While we are meeting on a virtual platform, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of these lands where we make our homes and do our work. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility to Indigenous peoples and their cultures from coast to coast. Please join me in a moment of reflection to acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past, and to consider how we can individually and collectively move forward in support of reconciliation, justice, and respectful collaboration. In honor of Community Living Month, Community Living Ontario and the Provincial Executive Directors Group has planned a series of 4 webinars that will focus on key issues in developmental services. We hope that you enjoy today's session and encourage you to register for the remaining 3. I would now like to introduce our facilitator for today, Doug Cartan. Doug has been involved with the community living movement for over 40 years, including roles with local and provincial organizations. As an executive director, community development officer, advocate, and consultant with disability-focused organizations across the country, Doug has endeavored to support more person-centered and person-directed work and service. Currently, Doug is co-leader with Seniors for Social Action Ontario, a volunteer group advocating for alternatives to long-term care facilities and better care and support for elderly and people with disabilities as they age. Welcome, Doug. I'll turn things over to you.
Thank you very much, Sherry. It's wonderful to be here this afternoon and to see so many people on this Zoom. So good afternoon to everybody, and welcome to the first webinar in this 4-part series hosted by Community Living Ontario and the Provincial Executive Directors Group. Today's session is creating an individualized funding framework and options in your community. During this session, please feel free to use the chat and put questions in the Q&A. We'll do our best to bring them forward at the right time. We should have some time after the presentation for some of these questions. As we begin today, I want to introduce our 4 presenters from down in the Windsor area. The first is Michelle Friesen. Michelle is a parent and leader of the Windsor-Essex Family Network, and somebody I've known for a long, long time. Heather Kerr is a family member, a sister, and also a leader at the Windsor-Essex Family Network. Colleen Mitchell, you'll hear from. She's the Associate Director of the Windsor-Essex Brokerage for Personal Supports. And of course, we have Melodie Cook. Many of you will know Melodie. Melodie is the Executive Director of Community Living Windsor. So with that introduction of our guest speakers, I'm going to turn it over to Melodie and let this flow.
Okay, so while Michelle, or Colleen, sorry, is bringing this up, the slide, we did want to let you know that we're not actually going to be going through all of the words on all of the slides. So they're really rich in content. So you will notice that we won't cover everything on them. We've included resources at the end, and we really encourage you to read through afterwards and use these slides as a resource as you hopefully move forward and are able to make some changes with some of the ideas that we give you today. Next slide. So first of all, we felt it was really important that we get on the same page with regards to when we're talking about individualized funding, what we mean. And what we don't mean by individualized funding. So first of all, there are a couple of different definitions, and it's important to know that there is a definition in Ontario through IFCO, but there's also international definitions. So what we're talking about today isn't just coming locally from Windsor. There are people who've been working on these kinds of things, both provincially, nationally, and internationally, and been a lot of research done. So in terms of an international definition, individualized funding is an umbrella term for disability supports that are funded on an individual basis. Individualized funding aims to facilitate self-direction, empowerment, independence, and self-determination. In terms of the Individualized Funding Coalition of Ontario, who's known as IFCO, their definition is that individualized funding refers to government funding used to pay for disability-related supports. IFCO uses the words individualized funding as an overarching phrase to include different types of funding that are individualized or personalized, including direct funding. The common element with individualized funding is about who has control and decision-making power for the funds. The family would have control when funds are for a child living with a disability, and the person as an adult would have control along with the support of trusted others in adulthood in terms of their funds. The other piece of this that's really important to know that from an agency perspective, activities that we design as agencies, and we all do it, that are created in advance by us as part of a menu of things to do are not the same thing as how typically individuals would choose to use their funds, because they typically choose to use their funds on very tailored supports. So with individualized funding, people along with trusted others decide through a planning process over time what they would like to do with their day and their life. And they build their days from the ground up using their vision, their trusted friends or family. They contract support people and other things that they need to put their roles and their life in place. And this, of course, takes a lot of time. I'll turn it over to Michelle.
Sorry about that. Hello, everyone. And just after Melodie says we're not going to read every word on every slide, we did decide there were some slides that we were going to do so. The next thing we wanted to talk about in terms of people being on the same page and or at least knowing what our frame of reference is that we hear lots of times folks who are interested in this approach and wanting to have an everyday ordinary life. And so it's always important to talk about that it's so much more than just about funding. So the values and principles that you're going to find ground everything in this PowerPoint presentation are about what it might be like living life using an individualized funding framework. And so always for us, it's about the person first and the person in their own way making decisions and having control over their life. And it's not much different than any of us who want control over our lives. And we also are very interdependent and need help from others, as do individuals that live with disabilities. So the person's vision, which might take time to establish in terms of having maybe not had a lot of opportunities to sometimes have been listened to, we often find, may take some time, but that's what guides things in terms of going forward with their life choices, and their passions, their interests and strengths are what is used around that. People are usually looking to community, and we even find lots of times people have different definitions of community. So for folks that we have been working with over the years and others we're connected with provincially, it's about everyday spaces and places to contribute and participate. And that idea as community as a first resort is really key to building a good life. Inclusion and belonging. People are usually saying they want, real work or be included in community. It leads to valued roles, whether it's work, volunteering, family roles, leisure, and lifelong learning, and gives people a good sense of who they are and we are. In terms of citizenship, it's about rights and responsibilities. It's about really learning what it is you need to take up in terms of your responsibilities. It's about having access and presence and being involved just like our friends, families, coworkers, and neighbors. And very important is flexible and portable funding, meaning if people have control over their funding, as Mel mentioned, to purchase the supports and services for their life, and for when life changes, they may want to move their money. They may want to take it somewhere else or use a different funding, transfer payment agency. Okay, here we go, sorry. And so these are the things that underpin everything that we're talking about as we go forward today. So the first thing we want to tell you is that although we're sharing an example that we've experienced in Windsor and Essex County that dates quite back a long time, in no way are we saying this is the only way to go. And, you know, we wouldn't dare to say that. Communities are different. Community development and communities are very important. But we would be able to say to you that we've been able to really hang on to some things that we've seen eroding because of the partnerships and because of the effort and energy that went into this. And that's important. So that's one of the things that we've learned. So in the 80s and 90s, there were people and families asking for different things. They were asking for more individualized things. They were asking for more control. They were asking for inclusion. And so I was one of those families that was asking for different things very early on. And we were seeing allocations of individualized funding in small examples and pilot projects, not only in our community, but we were connecting with people around the province where that was happening as well. And then when the government announced the Making Services Work for People initiative, which some people on this at this event will probably remember, we looked at it as an opportunity to figure out, okay, maybe we can change something. And we, you know, there was kind of agreement that all the power and control was held with the agencies. They had control of everything. They designed the programs, they decided who got the support, they advocated for the funds, they did the planning. And we started to think about how can we maybe do something that would change that. So choice was limited for people. And at the time, the president of People First Windsor and People First Ontario was trying to tell us that people didn't have real choice. They wanted freedom. They weren't feeling like they were being heard. And we had families at our planning tables and partnering agencies that agreed. So we started to do some change, started with the brokerage project, which you're going to hear more about. And it was one of 3 in the province at the time that the ministry was really cheerleading on and overseeing in those communities. We had agreement in our community that all funding would be individualized going forward, and that people would use personal support agreements to understand their roles and responsibilities. Agencies all signed on to, had in their service contracts, signed on to a portability clause, meaning people could move their funding around. And we designed a framework that we thought would protect the choice and freedom. So the first thing that happened is a brokerage project was put in place. And this diagram that you're looking at was designed a couple of years into things by people and by self-advocates and People First members who understood the roles and chose pictures to help explain that. And to this day, brokerage does use this document to share with people and understand how a broker facilitator would support people. And you can see that's what we were calling the support, which was independent of agencies and systems. And today they're called independent facilitators. So the framework that we talked about was very controversial at the time, and and what we did get agreement in our community. And again, what we wanted were to enable some options that would allow for freedom and choice for people. Now, it didn't mean that everyone engaged in this, and it also didn't mean that agencies just completely changed what they were doing. We still had the traditional services and the traditional agencies, but what we had were the possibility to work within what we called an empowerment model. And that meant that people could actually work with functions that were separate as opposed to being under one roof, which we consider more of an institutional model or a traditional model. So there were autonomous groups that were getting strong in our community, People First and Windsor-Essex Family Network, and they were seen as really the best places for helping people with advocacy and also being pivotal by being autonomous in asking for change. The Windsor-Essex Brokerage, brokerage project, that's where we set up the independent broker facilitators, now called independent planning and facilitation. It was very value-based, and their main role was to listen to the person. And although it might be in the context of family or a trusted support network, the broker's role was always to get those who knew the folks well to also understand what they were asking, because it was often different than what family or others wanted. We looked at our service providers, and there were 5 at the time that were involved in the restructuring as you know, their role to be really good at providing service and also making a way for people and families who want things to be very individual and very inclusive, making a way to make things easier for them. And then we always saw and still see that allocation of funds and access needs to be held by government. And at that time, we had a central access approach in our community, and government would allocate the funding. Today, we see that responsibility has shifted to the DSO, but for those who want to work within an empowerment model in our community, they still have these options. Have some things changed as government has, you know, moved forward in various ways? Absolutely, but by and large, people still can have someone helping them facilitate and plan that's outside the service system. They can go to a couple of, you know, a few agencies that really believe in honoring the individualized funding, whatever type, and the budgets, and still have autonomous groups to draw from. And Colleen, I'm turning it over to you.
Thanks, Michelle. So I'm going to focus on the partnership. And, you know, we are showing, of course, it's the organizations that are here today is our core partnership, but there are often partnering that is happening with some of the other organizations that you saw identified. But within our partnership, we wanted to tell you a little bit about our key roles. And so Windsor-Essex Brokerage, for which I work, is independent facilitation and planning. It's a small organization, and our role is to take the time to have conversations with people, their family, or anyone that they choose to come together. The idea is we're taking the time to explore, to learn about, to build relationships. So over time, the person's voice strengthens. And we build confidence in the possibility. And we support people to know they can make decisions. And that's a big thing that we're doing. We're shifting the expectations during our conversations. And we talk about what is the person's vision for what their life will look like. And they are describing it and they are creating it. And then we work together to figure out how to make that happen. So it's a process that takes a lot of time, because sometimes when people get to us, they haven't been comfortable or haven't felt that they've been able to put their voice forward. And they haven't had the confidence in terms of thinking about possibilities or making decisions. So you can only imagine how long it might take to start to move towards that. But it's the most beautiful thing when it happens. Community Living Windsor, in our partnership, is the direct service provision, and they do that in a variety of ways. And the thing that we've seen the most is that they support ongoing support for the empowerment model, and to look at ways that things can be done differently in our community. And so they've been a lead in terms of developing ways to support people and families with their individualized funding. And one of the most important things is, yes, we know that if agencies are supporting people with some of the human resource kinds of things and administering funds, because that is still a mechanism that is often required by the ministry to have individualized funding, is that it's flowing through an organization. And Community Living Windsor is looked at, how do we make that best happen? And they are an organization that has a cap on their administrative fees. So they are really, you know, thinking about how to make it easy, and they're committed to people having as much of their funding going to their supports. And for me, that I think is a huge principle. As well, they continue to invest in smaller groups, autonomous groups, right? Separate from service providing with no strings attached. And it's been wonderful. And they work, and this is a demonstration today at the provincial level and with coalitions to support change. And then I have often said that we wouldn't be able to do what we do in Windsor-Essex if we didn't have a strong Windsor-Essex family network. And that it is because it is autonomous. It creates healthy tension, and you'll hear more about that. Creates healthy tension between the three partners. We challenge each other when we think things aren't going the way they should. But most importantly, our Windsor-Essex Family Network is families talking to families. And they take the lead on building capacity and partnering. They listen to families, and they develop learning opportunities on things that families want to hear more about. And because we have these regular learning opportunities happening in our community, families then get the inspiration that they need to make some change or to take the next big leap, as I often say. So next, please. So our partners, we all believe we have a foundation of shared beliefs and goals. And, you know, even when we may be challenging each other, we go back to these beliefs and goals. They are the things that drive the decisions. And, you know, sometimes we've got to do a lot of reflective looking at what's working and not working. But this is the key. We return to these goals all the time. And you can see there's three key things. You know, we believe in people directing their own lives in their own way, and that is huge. And in their own way means we start from the principle of everyone has a voice, even if they are not using, even if they are, you know, not using verbal words. We believe people, along with families and trusted others, can do more and are more creative. And we achieve these things because we believe in the following, and I'm not going to leave those for you to speak to. And then I've probably mentioned already a few of these, but to say we are intentional about our partnering, we respect each other's roles, we work together to build capacity. There's funding and in-kind supports for learning events. We stand up. So when something needs to be looked at, we come together. We have a voice. We participate and present at provincial gatherings, and we support each other's strategic planning visions. So now with the next piece, you're going to hear a story that demonstrates how we've been working together.
Good morning. My name is Heather Kerr, and I'm sharing with you this morning about my sister Sheena, who has given me permission to share her story. Her story is about how having individualized funding in correlation for her vision for her future and independent facilitation allows her to lead a full life in community. My sister Sheena is a lady who directs her own life and connects with others in her community through her many valued social roles. As you can see here, she is a daughter, a sister, a niece, a cousin, an aunt to our brother Jonathan's children. Although Sheena has not been able to see our niece and nephew in person during COVID, she has done video calls to celebrate birthdays, making music videos to let them know she's thinking of them. She's also created cards for special occasions to be a part of gifts given. Since they are the next generation, as an auntie, she's not above spoiling them. She was also the scorekeeper when we hosted games over Zoom during our family COVID Christmas gatherings. You'll see here on the left, Sheena is visiting Jonathan, our brother, in the hospital at the birth of our niece, Emery, just prior to COVID. Then on the right, you'll see my sister Sheena with our mom, Donna, at the Detroit River, which is one of Sheena's favorite places to walk. You'll see more about that later. Meet with friends and see what is happening in her neighborhood as we live close by. Next slide, please. She is a musician. Being somebody who lives their life as a person who happens to be deafblind, communication takes place in different ways. One of Sheena's main ways to communicate and express herself is as a musician. She can pound on the piano with the best of them. Never a day goes by in Sheena's life where music is not being played. She loves a wide range of music too. During COVID, it was virtually attending symphony concerts, but she is looking forward to symphony concerts in person at the park again this summer. Even the cab drivers who transport her from place to place in the city know of her love of music and blast her favorite genres in the vehicle by switching to some of her favorite radio stations. On the far left, you'll see her sitting at her piano, which is fabulous since it is just at the height she needs as a wheelchair user. She's a gardener and a cook. She maintains her home by gardening and preparing dinner once a week for our family. She brings beauty to our home by watering the flowers the neighbors get to enjoy. She brings nourishment by the meals she creates for our family. In our house, everyone contributes to both the responsibilities of maintaining it and the joy of living in it. Seen here in the middle, these are the window boxes that Sheena and I plant to place on our porch, and that Sheena is responsible for watering daily during the spring and summer. She is also a friend. She's a good friend who walks through life with others no matter what they may be facing. She has been with them through both the ups and the downs. For instance, getting married or having a baby. The downs, like having to move into a long-term care facility due to health issues and then speaking at their funeral. When she could not get together in person with her friends during COVID, she still tried to maintain her friend calendar dates by switching to video calls or social distance walks by the river wearing a mask. Whenever she forms a friendship, their name gets added to the birthday calendar. And Sheena makes a point of sending them a card on their special day, or even sometimes a thinking of you card. Many of the friends she has made have been from being out in her community in the same place at the same time. This allows others to get to see beyond the immediate barriers they may initially prevent them from getting to know her. Once they see that Sheena loves the same things that they do, these obstacles are removed and natural friendship formed. On the right here, you'll see her friend Amanda and Amanda's husband Jason at their wedding, which Sheena was a valued and included guest at. Sheena got to know Amanda as a single woman who then met Jason and got to see their love story unfold. Sheena was all for Jason as he is Scottish, which is what our dad was very proud to be. She welcomed Jason's addition to her walking dates with Amanda that grew to include their dog Nico. They have recently had their first baby Brixton, and Sheena is looking forward to getting to know him. Next slide, please. She is a swimmer teacher, utilizing the local community pool and beach to train the lifeguard staff. She teaches them how to use the accessible equipment for which she uses her voice to advocate for. This equipment ensures Sheena and others can enjoy the facilities. When there was no portable lift to go from water wheelchair to the chairlift to go into the pool, Sheena and her family, along with our other community and family leaders, advocated to get one put in place. As the pools were closed and Sheena used the local beach, she had the lifeguards use the Moby chair. If you look on the bottom left, seen here, they would do drills during their weekly training sessions so that they would learn how to assist somebody in and out of the wavy water. She is known by all the staff at her local pool and beach, and they know when to expect her by readying the equipment for her use. Her motto is that if it is accessible, it opens public spaces to whoever wants to use them and eliminates those barriers that sometimes stand in the way. There will always come a time when somebody needs accessibility in their life, whether through using a stroller after having kids, utilizing the button to open the doors, using a cane after hip or knee surgery, and needing a wider doorway, or needing the chairlift to get into the pool as a senior who cannot use the pool ladder anymore, but needs to maintain an active body and lifestyle. Now, top left, you'll see Sheena. This is one of my favorite pictures of her because I call it her mermaid self. She's freely drifting in her flotation belt, which is the only time she experiences true restrictive free movement, not encumbered by her physical restrictions. Also is a picture of the Moby chair, as I already referenced, used to get into the water at our local beach on the bottom left, and the accessible path used to get through the sand. This path was an idea brought from another community in Ontario that our family thought would work perfectly in Windsor and Essex. She is an acrylic artist and an entrepreneur. She's a deafblind acrylic artist who uses a back massager as her paintbrush, and she shares her artistic process and talent with others in many ways. She sells her cards and paintings in local art and craft shows and on her Facebook business page, sometimes in person or virtually. She uses her artistic talents to spread love and joy by remembering to send a card on special occasions to her friends and family. Those in her community, like the local bus drivers, know her as an artist and have made an effort to attend an art show or purchase cards from Sheena. She has sold out of her Christmas cards released annually the last 2 years, even though she could not attend an event in person. The top right is Sheena and I at her booth in one of the local art shows before COVID. She's also an encourager, baker, and crafter. She tries to spread love to let everyone know they are special to her by baking and creating love packages with the help of her family and interveners. She prepared her part of these packages for the last 2 Valentine's Days holidays during COVID, when she was not able to see others in person. She most recently baked whoopie pies and asked me to deliver them on her behalf to her friends and our family. She even helped to create the little cards and boxes they would be delivered in. You can see the Valentine love packages I just mentioned on the bottom. Next slide, please. When faced with the decision as to what would happen next after school was done for Sheena, some choices needed to be made. Sheena, with the support of my parents, chose to apply for individualized funding, intervenor dollars, 18 years ago, as Sheena expressed a desire to be in her own home. This meant that for her vision for the future to be put into action, Sheena and our family would need to work together with the 3 local organizations of Sheena's choice. Each relationship has shifted and grown over the years for Sheena to be able to live her life in community, which comes with its own challenges and barriers. However, her relationships with these organizations have strengthened her voice by being recognized by them as a citizen who contributes and whose voice is listened to. The first choice was made to go with an organization that would support Sheena as the director of her own life. That is where Windsor-Essex Brokerage for Personal Supports came in. This also meant that Sheena would have the benefit of having an independent facilitator to help her through the process of seeing her vision of a full life in community come to fruition. Her independent facilitator came alongside of Sheena and our family to help with the purchase of supports in the form of independent contractors, facilitating meetings with her team of independent contractors, aiding Sheena in strengthening her voice to be used as an advocate in her life and community, working with Sheena to develop her valued social roles, and encouraging the contribution to her community as a citizen. They also brought good information forward to Sheena and our families. The choice was hers about what goals she chose to focus on after trial and error. One of those highlights would be when they partnered with other local organizations and a local lawyer to talk about what it means to purchase services from self-employed independent contractors. Ideas and information relevant to what is important to Sheena flow through facilitation at the meetings with her independent contractors. One of those ideas was how Sheena could use her voice to lead a virtual walk in the art form of a video for our local Jane's Walk Festival. Jane Jacobs was a writer, urbanist, and activist who championed the voices of everyday people in neighborhood planning and city building. The Jane's Walk Festival here in Windsor, ours is coming up next weekend, May 6th to the 8th, is a movement of free, citizen-led walking conversations inspired by Jane Jacobs and her life's work. It encourages people to share stories about their neighborhoods, discover unseen aspects of their communities, and use walking to connect with their neighbors. Jane's Walk is a community-based approach to city building that uses volunteer-led walking tours to make space for people to observe, reflect, share, question, and reimagine the places in which they live, work, and play. Sheena, as a teacher to 2 placement students in the deaf-blind program at George Brown College, along with her interveners, created a video about her neighborhood from her perspective as someone who happens to live life with some challenges others may not face or experience. So I'd like to share the video that she created here.
And Colleen, I believe Colleen will be sharing the video. Is that right?
Yes.
Hey, Sheena. Hey, are you ready to go for a walk? What do you see, Bella?
The next slide, thank you. As you can see, that's some of Sheena's neighborhood that I was describing earlier, and the river being one of them. Sheena's next choice was the organization that would be her transfer payment agency of choice, which was Community Living Windsor. They act for her as the local bank or financial advisor, helping with budgeting, financial tracking, assisting with the purchase of services through the payment reimbursement of invoices, and inform us of government protocols that may affect Sheena and her individualized funds. They put concrete financial feet to Sheena's vision for her future by supporting it. They help Sheena and our family navigate through life by partnering with the other local organizations to put on information events that are vital to this. They also provide a way for Sheena's independent contractors to maintain a standard level of CPR and first aid by hosting the classes where certification can be achieved. Then came Windsor-Essex Family Network, the third organization Sheena chose to work with. They are the center of information about anything relating to families who have a family member with a disability. Sheena and our family chose to become members of this organization as a way to meet with other families who are going through the very same thing that we were and had the same values and principles. This gave Sheena and our family inspiration and emotional support. Much was learned at the information events they offer with the support of their partners, which was and is essential to Sheena's vision for her life and planning for her future. Topics that are important to Sheena and our family include RDSPs, wills, estates, supported decision-making, support circles, microboards, etc. Being an autonomous organization that does not see a niche that Sheena fits into and welcomes everyone has been essential to Sheena's growth as an adult. Next slide, please. As a result of working with these organizations, Sheena and our family have built capacity and gained confidence as volunteers and family leaders. We try to inspire, encourage, and support others just like those families who traveled the path before us at Windsor-Essex Family Network. We have shared our story and experiences, as well as sat on committees or focus groups as the family voice. During COVID, one of the ways we tried to get through it was by playing games with others virtually, by utilizing our valued roles as hostesses and game scorers. And of course, being the women that we are, we couldn't do that without a little bling. We had the privilege of sharing this with other families and community partners at some events led by Family Network. As an older sibling to my sister Sheena, I have taken on many roles within her life. First and foremost, as her sister, but then as my father developed Parkinson's while Sheena was in her last years at school, gradually becoming a partner to my mother in supported decision-making, stepping into that role my dad had and continuing with his vision for her. As a sibling, advocacy came naturally to me with the support of our local organizations, and I began to develop this valued social role. I have the gift of seeing the world through a different lens as a sibling who happens to have a sibling with a disability. When asked to become a board member of Family Network, I welcomed the opportunity to support other families like ours in all the various choices to be made by passing on good information. Seeing the need for sibling emotional support, I started and co-facilitate our sibling group and SibShare gatherings, with the support of Family Network. I hope Sheena's story gives you a concrete example of some of the topics we are discussing today and have already made mention of. Thank you for this opportunity to share with you about how having individualized funding and the support of organizations that partner with each other has been essential to Sheena being able to live a full, meaningful life in community. The previous picture showed Sheena, my mom Donna, and myself in our virtual family games night getup that celebrated St. Patrick's Day with our bling and trivia. Thank you.
So let me start the conversation a little more about our partnering. And I wanted to say the orange box talks about the inspiration that we received when we were starting up Windsor-Essex Brokerage. It came from a TASH conference. Many of you will probably know Tom Nairney and his work with the self-determination projects. And it was Tom who was really encouraging the community along with Malcolm Jeffries, who was the ED of Community Living Windsor now, and or then, sorry, and really came back and said, this is something, this is what the families are asking for. This is something we have to try. And of course, it's an option. And that's what we would encourage. We started in 1997. The thing that I really want you to take away is that we've been evaluated many times, and it's always been shown to have very positive outcomes. And our results of our first independent evaluation resulted in ongoing annualized funding. And one of the outcomes was that 17 people and families moved their thinking from wanting a group home, because that's what they knew at the time, to their own place with supports in the first year. And that's such a good example of the kinds of shifting of expectations, because sometimes people and families, trusted others, they only know one thing. So what I want to say is we began with one facilitator. That's it. We got going with one facilitator. We had another facilitator position added in the year 2000. And then in 2014, we added a position to work with youth 13 to 18 years. And we were so happy to see that, because it is a belief that we feel the earlier we can get people talking with each other and thinking about what an everyday ordinary life could look like, the better. And at the bottom, you see a link that is a booklet. It talks more about what we do, and it talks about the various evaluations and outcomes. So next slide, please. And yeah, so I mean, the thinking of how someone could live or belief in that is a common shift in expectations, but we also do a lot of conversation about, you know, who do you want to be? What kinds of things do you want to be involved in? And we figure out how to make that happen. So, you know, we do encourage people to dream big, and we figure out how to make something happen that's going to work for people. There's continued recognition, and that's a lot because of the support we get from our partners, the Family Network and Community Living Windsor. And in fact, Community Living Windsor looks for opportunities of when they feel planning support is needed. And right now they're looking at different ways in terms of what they had for day supports, and they've asked Brokerage to work with people and families to think about how they could use community resources just like anyone else. So, you know, we listen to families, we try to respond, we reach out to our partners to do that quite often, like the learning opportunity on independent contractors. And we do a lot of research in community development to think about what could shift things and what is needed. And I see there's a question on how we're funded, and that is through the Ministry of Children, Community and Social Services through annualized funding. Mel?
Thanks, Colleen. I'm not going to go through everything on this slide other than to say, obviously, we want to make sure that we have really strong, active, autonomous groups in our community, things like People First, Brokerage, and the Family Network. And we selfishly really want independent facilitation to thrive in Windsor and Essex County because it results in a lot of really good outcomes. We have a long history of supporting this model, including looking to our partners to lead, to be a resource, as well as us providing in-kind and monetary supports with no strings attached. We find that there's a huge return on the investment that we give, and it has an impact on planning with new people who come to our agency. That's a great way to start out. If you set people up right from the beginning to have a much wider view of what life might hold, it's wonderful for them. We look to them when we have people who are in a group home who want something different. And we look to them, as Colleen said, for folks that have been in a congregate day support and are looking to change their lives there. We find really that it leads people, excuse me, to think and dream very differently. It's almost, if you look at think about a camera lens, and you know, when you have the lens that zooms in versus a very wide angle lens, and the wide angle lens really lets you see what your entire life might be and what are all the really beautiful options out there for people. So next slide. And so over the years, obviously, we've witnessed benefits to all kinds of people, and we've witnessed some challenges. And there are times as leaders where we really have to step in with our current service system. And you'll find that the system sometimes pushes us in a very contrary way. I would challenge even in a contrary way with regards to the ministry's journey to belonging document at times. And we recently had a situation where there was a young lady whose mother passed away rather suddenly. And we were involved with her a little bit in her life, and we're able to get Brokerage involved, and we're able to get some short-term funding. And Brokerage was able to develop over time a very good relationship with her, a really trusting relationship. We found over time that she started to really assert herself, was making choices, starting to decide where she actually wanted to live, who she wanted to support her. She's at the point today where she hires and fires her own supporters, quite frankly. And the service system during all of this was, because it was temporary funding, was looking at things like timelines and really pressuring us that there had to be this period that she was allowed to grieve, and then all these other things had to happen. And I have to say there was a lot of pressure on us to have her go to day supports, to have her go to a group home. And thank God for our partners, that didn't happen. And she has a life and is asserting herself today, and her life will look very different than it would have looked had we let the system influence that. And I would suggest to you that your program supervisors, if you have great relationships with them, can be a real ally when some of these pressures come along. Next slide. And I believe this is Heather.
Yes, Windsor-Essex Family Network is, the most important thing is it's an autonomous family group. You know, supporting families, family to family support through childhood and adulthood, although at all stages of life. The most important thing to note is that we try to pass on good information. A lot of this is through information meetings and events that we put on and lead, and working together with our partners, and provide inspiration and hope for families, and that this sometimes can create healthy tension, but it is no strings attached. Partners invest their time and talent, and sorry, the slide switched in the middle of my thought. The strength is due to the commitment of partners and funders who choose to invest in Windsor-Essex Family Network. And the strength comes from the value-based family leaders and volunteers. Healthy tensions do occur as a result of the different roles that each has, but this brings forward change and improvement.
So we just want to talk a little bit about some of the opportunities and obstacles that we've seen. Again, I'm not going to say everything on the slides, but you do, you know, if you're looking to be part of something different for your own community, you really want to read through our presentation, because you have an opportunity to make long-lasting change. And we're talking about people's lives here, so it's so important. So we do experience a lot of healthy tension. I have to say that the Family Network actually rents space in our building. And there are many, many hallway conversations where there's very healthy tension and sometimes disagreement. They certainly challenge us to remember why we're here at all times. And I will tell you that the culture of your workplace is not created in your office, it is created in your hallways, and they certainly help to create that. And in addition, Brokerage is always there to work with the people that we support who may be looking for something different. And no matter where they are, whether they're new to us or we've supported them for a number of years, they're always there to do that. And I'm going to go to the next slide. It's really important that we invest in a community first model. And we talked earlier about what that meant, but really looking to the community first. Another thing it's very important for us to do is to really challenge the language where menus of atypical things are presented. And we've all seen this when you go to your DSO, where menus of very typical things are presented, very atypical things are presented as normal, or where normal things either don't exist on the list or are called things like innovative or others. So it's up to us as leaders, as agency leaders, along with family networks and independent facilitators, to really work to change the system so that things that are typical and normal start to show up on these lists, and things that are very traditional and sometimes archaic kind of go by the wayside. I think we have to also really see past the discomfort. Agencies sometimes can run like a well-oiled machine. I've experienced that in my work in 2 different agencies. And I would tell you that if you're running like a well-oiled machine, you're probably not doing what you should be doing. People's lives are messy and they're beautiful. And so we should be feeling that in our work. Our work should be messy and our work should be beautiful. And if you're uncomfortable with the fact that your agency is running like a well-oiled machine, be proud of that. That's a good sign that you're seeing the need for change. It's important that we remember that life is a journey, not a destination, and that people need a slower process. You can't put these timelines on people for how they're going to experience grief, how they're going to want their life to unfold. Our experience has also been that folks with some of the most complex needs do far better when we have independent facilitation than they do in other kinds of traditional supports. They seem to be able to have that security or that base from which to create their life and to make really good decisions. And again, remember, we're talking about people's lives here. I would ask you all to picture someone you absolutely adore and think about what you would want for them. And I'll bet it's not traditional services. And I also would suggest to you that we need to be really careful about the default to traditional services. Oftentimes, people will come to us out of the CAS system, and the first thing we look at is something like group living. We really need to challenge that, because we often give people, we support a sense of needing that kind of support when they really don't. And then 5-10 years later, it's really difficult to get them out of that mindset and to say, you really could experience life very differently and you could probably be doing a whole lot more on your own. That's really, really hard when we've sort of brainwashed them by thinking we're the experts and we need to surround them. So next slide. Just like Nike in terms of, opportunities, I would say just do it. Look at the empowerment model and how you could separate function in your own community, come together with other groups and agencies to find a way to start. As Colleen says, it's one facilitator at a time, someone that's not connected and not conflicted, because we can only wear one hat. And start putting planning and facilitation. I would suggest to you, put in your budget request. You can get annualized funding for that. They're going to limit you, but that's a good way to start something locally in terms of getting one facilitator. Start asking for those sorts of things. Also look for opportunities where you have what the ministry calls vacancies, to free up money for new people who may be looking for something very different than a vacancy in a group home. And that's again where you need to work with your program supervisor a lot. Next slide. I'd really encourage you to read Journey to Belonging and remember the tenets of it and use those in your arguments. They will help you to reroute dollars and make arguments to reroute dollars to people. They will help you to ask for planning dollars. They will help you to only request reasonable accountability measures. There's a lot of pressure on us to really ask for unreasonable accountability measures for families, when in fact, when someone's surrounded by people who love them and care about them, that is absolutely the best risk management that there is in the world. You can't get it any better than that. So if people are asking you for something different, instead of asking, why would we do this? Ask, why wouldn't we do this? Again, we're talking about people's lives, and you have a great opportunity to figure it out together with partners. Next slide.
Thanks, Mel. I'm going to talk about the journey is ongoing. So you can see that we started back in 1987 in this community. In the 90s, we made a lot of, we made some changes, but our journey continues in 2022. And so, we just give you an idea of some of the things that we do and some of the things that we look for. And, one is, as I said, we hold ourselves to those shared beliefs, the vision, values, and principles we have for people, even when it gets challenging. We're always looking for, okay, what gets presented out there and how can we invite others in? We've had a My Home, My Choice initiative locally where we've done a lot of housing initiatives, and we've really brought to the forefront the housing needs of people with developmental disabilities. You can see some of our partners there. We, when the Housing Task Force opportunities came forward, the first thing we did is say, oh, okay, is this a possibility? How do we look at getting some individualized funding for people? So that's the kind of thing that we're always doing. We're just looking at opportunities. We try to figure out how we can make it work. Continue to get behind our family network because, as I said, I don't think we'd be where we're at in this community if we didn't have a strong family network. When people come forward, we think about how do we make it happen? Like, we don't wait for government funding necessarily. We look to what's in the community. Housing is a good example of that. We talk to our local housing providers to say, hey, people with developmental disabilities need housing too. How do we put, things together? Next slide. So these are some three really recent examples. So we've done a lot of this work for years, but we revisit it and we kind of have regular conversations about what are we seeing now? And like, what do we need to respond to? What are families being challenged with? What are they telling us? So we do a lot of reflective kind of practice. We have right now some pretty intense support circle work happening, and we're learning from each other. That's another thing. We always have learning, like we're lifelong learners. And we learn with each other. So we don't do learning, for example, without people and families. We're involved with supported decision making. That's a primary principle for brokerage. That's how we work. And we are involved with the project being led by Community Living Ontario around equal right to decide. We've had another project called, it was Local I Decide, that was in partnership with our legal assistance Windsor group. And we've done a lot of work over the years around Law Reform Commission, because we really believe supported decision making is actually one of the critical puzzle pieces that is missing from making a lot of this stuff work. And I already spoke to the housing example. Sorry. Okay, so summing up what we've learned, the vision is for an everyday ordinary life. And so we believe it's possible when the option of independent facilitation and planning is available. It's amazing, the creativity, the desires, the dreams that people are holding for themselves. And we just need to figure out how it comes out. And as I said, it's really important that we acknowledge that not everyone uses words. And so we got to figure out, like, because we believe that everyone has those dreams and possibilities in their head. We just need to figure out how to bring it out. You can look at the end, we have some documents, and one is this individualized funding framework. It's a national, done by the National Individualized Funding Discussion Group. It is from 2011. So again, I say we're 11 years later, but the beauty is this quote, which talks about the elements of successful individualized funding. Next, I think
Thanks, Colleen. Yeah, thank you, Colleen. Before I skip to the next slide, I want to also sort of emphasize that we picked this quote because we created our empowerment model back in the late 90s, and this document came out in 2011, and they were very clear about what was, a best practice in personal planning, that it be directed by the person, be separate from eligibility, service delivery, and funding functions, be facilitated by an external neutral party who is knowledgeable about options and support, and be available to the person as needed over time, which fits very closely to what we are saying about the role of an independent facilitator. So I'm going to go even faster because I know we want to wrap up and have time for questions, but some of the stuff these are points that are already made, but Heather really brought it to the forefront when we were talking about how we never forget that the foundation of the work is listening to the person and their vision. So lots of time in this presentation, you probably heard things like listening to the families or listening to the person. Even every time you've heard the word families, it's really listening to the person in the context of their families. And sometimes us families actually need a bit of a kick too, when we have to be able to get things to move for our sons and daughters and sisters and brothers. What we have found for people who had a vision and held on to it for years and years and years and years before there was any support funding, some of the work is keeping that hope alive. And we see that as, families getting together and sharing stories and sharing possibilities, even when it doesn't look like it's possible to make it happen. You'll be able to look at this slide. It's a slide we used with the Housing Task Force project, which really was to talk about the hard work. And so I'm going to kind of go off script a bit. And this shows you that, a vision might be developed from the top, and then thoughts are shared. They may not be shaped. People talk about that. The facilitator would ask really tough questions, get people thinking. In the context of a home, it'd be, what does a home mean to you? But it can be in the context of any valued role or any part of life. There would be legwork to be done by people and families, and oftentimes the person themselves is much more ready to go and move and wants to see things happen, but it just doesn't happen right away for a variety of reasons: family, environment, funding, but always trying to help with one step, and it just cycles back and forth, back from the vision and back again. It's a lot of hard work. So what I would say, we know this is not for everyone. And it wasn't our intention at all, by sharing all of the various pieces and the framework and what we believe make it sound easy. It is not easy. It has not been easy for Sheena's family. It has not been easy for our family and many others, but we are choosing this path, which is often harder work, because we so badly would like and see that our family members want to live a regular everyday life with support. Part of the hard work are some of the existing barriers, and part of the hard work is just the reality of the way things are. And that's why it's so important for families like us, for our daughter. Our daughter knows her independent facilitator has her back, and when things are slugging slower, and she listens to that facilitator say, hey, okay, how are we going to get this moving? And
there we go. I can hear that. Sorry.
And then the other piece would be that when you have an organization that's really trying to look at how do we make things easier, like tracking finances or helping families as the bank for their funding, those are things that help quite a bit with things. And I'm going to turn the thank you and wrap up to Mel. Oh, nope, sorry, I'm supposed to flip through some slides very quickly. So we've got a sheet with resources that you can easily link to some of the things that back up or connect or where we got quotes from, and the organizations that can give you more information about independent facilitation and planning. We've put together a whole bunch of questions for people who participated to reflect on later and take a look at that might help you get started. If you want to learn more about who we are, you can read that later. And Mel, it's all yours.
Okay, so we would really like to thank Community Living Ontario for hosting this series. We realize the ministry is looking at transformation, and I think it's going to take all of us to make sure that that transformation actually happens. And so we don't have more of the same, and services are truly transformed, and they're directed by people and families, which is always who should have been directing them. So thank you for that. And just to say, as Michelle said, the shifting power thing is not easy. We like to talk sometimes like we do it, but we don't always do what we think we do. So we sincerely hope that we provided some doable ideas for agency leaders who do want to shift power to people in their families and networks. We know from experience that change supported by powerhouse agency leaders, because oftentimes people will listen to us, is what makes a big difference in a community. And this is especially true when you have people, families and networks who are seen as respected by agency partners and by others. And so thank you so much for your time today. And we have a few minutes, I think, to take questions. I'll turn it back to Doug, I think.